Hello, everybody, and welcome to another American Scouser podcast. I am back in action in Chicago, your host, Timuchin, as always, and we have our regular crew. This Monday, we have the galley with the body of the 15-year-old back in action. That clip, I got a couple of messages directly saying they cracked up when they saw that clip today. But how's it going, galley?
Oh, it's just wonderful.
And as always, we have Paul Bickler with us, who just announced that he loves potatoes more than anything else. What's going on, Paul?
That's a true story. I'm well. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Any specific format of potatoes or just potatoes
No,
in
just
general?
not sweet potatoes. It's like because that's just like blasphemy in general.
It's just wrong.
Yeah, right. Like don't. I have a real problem with making salty things sweet. Like I think that's like one of like the devil's cruelest tricks. Like kettle corn, like I just want to set on fire. Like so, as long as it's like baked potatoes, French fries, even the rare scallop potatoes, mashed potatoes, yeah, anything like that. I just sold we got a new account at the brewery, and they're a high end cocktail bar. And I went in and they're like, yeah, we do 4 kinds of French fries with 14 condiments and high end cocktails. And I was like, cool, I'll be under the bar. Just like, if you need me, just tap me. I'll wake up and come out and get you whatever you need. Shove a French fry down my gullet and shove me back under. So yes,
Man,
it counts for my pear shape as well.
never thought we would be talking trash about kettle corn on this podcast. And as a kettle corn lover, popcorn lover, I'm slightly offended. Gally, do you go salt and sweets?
I mean, I can handle it. It's not my favorite. I mean, I'm kind of with Paul. I'm more of the salt side on all savory items.
Same here, I guess. Well, that was good trivia about our friend Bickler over here that he does love potatoes. I might pose this as a podcast, like a trivia question down the line. But today's trivia question is totally different. So I went easy on you guys today. So it's going to be an easier question. You guys should be able to nail this, I would think. We're going to talk about League Cup appearances and stuff like that later on in the show. So I figured I would go with that and ask you guys who has the most League Cup appearances as a Liverpool player. I don't know why you're waiting, Bickler. You know we're starting with you.
Yeah, and I'm starting with Steven Gerrard. So let's move it on. Let's go.
And you should know by now, I go kind of out of my way to make sure the answers to these podcasts. Like even Gally has figured it out by now that I go out of my way to make sure Gerrard is not the answer to every trivia over here. So
right, so everyone's disappointed. This is going well.
This is why I love trivia. Brings out the hate in Bickler. More hate than sweet potatoes. Go ahead.
This is just straight League Cup finals appearances, or just appearances?
See, don't go Bickler on me and
I asked
the words and stuff. Most League Cup appearances. There was no little thing.
That's the spirit, Gally.
Oh. That's it. I genuinely, what did
I was like, was that an answer? What was that?
No, it's
domestic League Cup or international League Cup?
I'm gonna go with the same answer. I think last time I said Ian Rush, it was wrong. I'll go with Ian Rush again because I'm looking for a player who's played long enough for this club. He can make a lot of appearances.
Rich Kramer is guessing Lucas. We're going a lot more further back. Let me give you guys a hint. He has also scored the most goals in League Cup for Liverpool. Come on, people. Let's do this. Cosgrove says Bruce Grubler. I'm assuming he did not hear the last tip. You guys ready for this? We have a winner in BJ. Ian Rush was the answer to today's trivia. I thought this was easy, but as like always, I have overestimated you kids. Ian Rush, 78 appearances for the League Cup. Like I say, later on in the show, we're gonna kind of talk about who, in terms of who we want in the League Cup and stuff. There was a lot of talk going on this week, so we will get to that. But we will start with the weekend's game. I ended up watching the game afterwards because I was traveling and I kind of watched the first half on the phone. It's just, you can kind of follow the game on the phone, but it's just not the same thing. As big as these phones are, I kind of like need the big screen to see what else is going on and stuff like that. But enough to almost have a heart attack in the second half. Let's start with the starting 11. It was good to see Ox back there and Galley. I mean, pretty much the strongest lineup we can put out there, right?
Yeah, that was my comment. I basically feel like this is the best 11 right now as far as health and fitness goes that we have with the players available. And I think we saw it for a little bit there in the first half.
How about you, Bickler? Is this the lineup you're putting out there if you're
Yes, best 11. I think the Jones Ox thing is interesting because they're used interchangeably and we see them in both spots. So it's always interesting to see what iteration we're going to see that and why. I haven't figured it out yet, but yeah, best 11 for sure.
So let me ask this then. Not shocked or did not want to go with Taki, especially, I mean, in generally, like going back to what you're saying, Bickler, I do like the Ox and Jones being able to interchange. You don't know who's playing as 9 and who's not and stuff like that. But as a winger, never too big on Ox. Would rather have him come like from midfield as the middle. I mean, any questioning in terms of why Taki wasn't out there, Gally?
I mean, let's just cut to the chase. I think that there was a period of time. I mean, we all know I am one of the bigger Taki apologists, I guess, and have been waiting for his moment to come. I think Jurgen has come to grips with the fact that he can play a role in the squad, but he's not a starting 11 player for this team, whether we're down a few players or not. And I think his best attribute is coming into a game and making an impact off the bench. And he offers that, and that's the player he is. And I think that's what the managers realized. I think I've realized it as a supporter, and we're better set up having Ox. I mean, obviously, in a League Cup semifinal, we were better off having a 17-year-old make his first time.
Yeah, good. I mean, good way to look at it, I guess, too. I just like wanted, when I first saw the lineups, I was like, Taki is not there up front in the front three was my thing. But I agree. I thought it was probably like the strongest lineup we can put out there with all the injuries and whoever's gone and stuff like that. And then the game starts, Bickler. And I have to say, as I was watching it, I mean, you knew, and the goal did come in early, but you knew it was coming any second. And I have to say, in terms of like our play, the passing, how crisp everything looked, those first 20, 25 minutes could possibly be the best we played all season, despite missing, Mo and Mane up top.
Yeah, it was a weird one because they came out and sort of hit us right away in the mouth. Like they had the first like real big chance of the match, I felt like. And then it seemed like we responded very early on, which was great. Big chance of the match, I felt like. It was a weird one. It was definitely a weird one. The fact that like we were so dominant in those first 25 minutes. And, it just felt like that thing could have easily been like, I think of like the Arsenal match from a couple of years back where we basically put in 4 on them in the first 30 minutes of the match. And we could have easily seen that in this one. So, yeah, I mean, it was great to see us come out and play like that with that team. I felt like that thing, the game was really dictated from the midfield. And I thought what was really nice to see was that like we seemed like we felt very comfortable holding like 90% of the possession, right? And not just possession for the sake of having it. Like we really had him hemmed in. And I felt like the press was the best that I've seen in a long time. And that's really what makes that whole thing tick. When we can get a team penned in and we're pressing like that, we're almost unplayable.
So David says, we used to be brilliant when we went ahead in the games. Now we are so bad. What's going on there is a complacency. And this is what I want to kind of like head towards as we go. So we start out great. The goals are coming in. And like you're saying, Bickler, the press is very effective. Is that Crystal Palace being Crystal Palace and in shock? Because I really thought the lineup they put out there, I know why they put that lineup up there, not having Benteke out there, for example. But I think it kind of like backfired on them because they had literally nobody to hold the ball at all. So we kept coming wave after wave after wave. So do you put that, Gally, on more what we did or more Crystal Palace kind of like not lining up correctly against us?
I definitely think Patrick Vieira missed the mark by starting Mateta over Benteke. Though when the second half, once they made their tactical adjustments, the Edouard and Mateta worked well and caused a lot of problems for our center backs. But in the first half, it was a real problem for them. And I think not having a target man up front made it impossible for them to get out. At one point in the first half, I think Virgil and Matip were no more than 20 yards outside of their box. And that was our line. And they had 11 players behind the ball at that point, and they were just completely pegged in. And I think it was right before the second goal happened. I think the big problem that they had in the first half was that they were actually kind of letting us have all that possession. They weren't doing what they've been doing to other big sides, which is trying to actually play football and come at them. They were almost sitting back against us and almost defending, looking to hit us on the counter, and it's really not their game. And in the second half, I know we're going to get to the adjustments that they made in the second half, but in that second half, we really saw more of what they've done to cause other bigger sides problems so far in this season.
So let's get to that. So Asher says, Crystal Palace switched formations 4 times and we didn't adjust to it, which I agree. So the second half starts. It's a totally different ball game. Suddenly, like a game of 2 halves, if you will, because obviously Crystal Palace, we knew, right, going into that half, it doesn't take a rocket science to know that they're not going to come out the same exact way the second half because they were getting their heads beaten in, and it was only a matter of time where it was going to be another 7-goal away thing going. Bickler, why do you think we were not be able to adjust to that? Or I guess more than adjust, even anticipated, seeing what they could possibly do?
I think there's a couple things going on here, right? I don't think it had much to do with their personnel. I tend to agree that it had more to do with formation shifts than anything else. I rate Mateta. I don't think they're losing anything by not having Benteke out there. Mateta is a 6'4", 200-pound behemoth who scored a worldie of a first goal for that club. I think they came out in the second half with obviously some urgency. They definitely got their teeth kicked in at halftime. I don't think it's complacency on our part. I think it's a combination of the fact that they made some big time personnel changes in terms of formation that we couldn't adjust to and didn't adjust to. And I think that's kind of a pattern that's a little bit concerning in the fact that I don't feel like this is a side that makes tactical adjustments on the fly very well. And I think that's been an ongoing issue, especially because if you see that teams are learning and adjusting to how we play, I don't feel like we're as good as adjusting to other sides. And I think that has a little bit to do with our personnel, and I think that has to do with our style. I do feel like we have this one system, this high press system, this high line system that really emphasizes these high flying fullbacks as attackers, as basically 4th and 5th attackers. And I feel like this is a team that doesn't I'm a broken record at this point. This is a team that doesn't know how to bleed out games. It doesn't know how to slow this thing down. And the interesting thing is if we had played with the possession-based style that we had in the first half when we were fully attacking and Palace sat back, we could have bled this thing out. But I think, when they made those formation shifts and we weren't able to counter, we didn't have that anymore. We went from having, almost 80% possession to 45% possession in the second half. And that was the difference. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't see enough of our personnel in terms of what we do when we make system changes. I just know that we don't make them very often. So yeah, I think it's a tactics thing, man. I think it's really down to our lack of ability to make changes and not only match formations and have answers that way, but stylistically, it's to be able to slow down the way that we play. and bleed this things out. And that's like, that's one thing I admire about City, right? They're super high flying and they can put 8 goals on you, but they can also just slow that thing down and just hold on to the ball and make you chase it around. And I wish we did a little more of that.
I thought, for example, like we did that well against Arsenal in the cup game, where once we had the lead, we were like, okay, well, we got the lead, and we were able to kind of control the ball. But so let me play the devil's advocate here because I'm good at that, and come and ask you, Gally, because Asher was saying like we're too set on our 4-3-3. And like Bickler's talking about, us not being able to make changes or not be willing to make changes. So which one do you think it is? Is it because we are set on that 4-3-3? Is it more like a kind of like an arrogant stubbornness where we're like, this is how we play, and if we do it right, doesn't matter what the other team does? Or is it lack of options to be able to make those changes? Especially this game. I think in general, it probably goes more to the stubbornness. Because obviously we have a deeper squad, but with the kind of like a lack of options, is it more lack of options this week, you think? Or is it more just a stubbornness, like, this is what we do, it works well, and that's what we go with?
I'm going to say lack of options overall because the manager chooses it to be that way. We've talked about the small squad and not liking to switch it up. I think when you don't use a big squad and you don't rotate the squad you have, your tactics will automatically be less, because you spend more time focused with the small group of players on a certain tactic. What makes no sense to me is we don't alter our tactics as we take leads. We play the high line we play so that we can attack on the front foot and we can keep, the high press on. But when we go up by 2 goals, we still play a ridiculously high line when we've seen for a half that we've given up opportunity after opportunity to speedy wingers coming in from behind. Yet our fullbacks still bomb forward like they're setting assist records, because they are. But do we really need a 3rd or a 4th goal when we're up 2-0? We just need to see out victories. And to me, that was the difference of the title-winning side. What made them just so dominant was we'd go up 1-0 in the first half, and I knew the game was over. We just won out games, whether we were playing well, whether we were playing great. We just did. And I don't see that anymore. We're almost back to the old side, unfortunately, where we have to outscore everyone. And it doesn't matter if we have a 2-goal lead. I'm worried about the mistake that will lead to, the quick goal that then makes this a barn burner until the end. And, it is getting a little frustrating.
So why do we do that, Bickler? I thought you had Klopp's ear. I mean, why can't we correct it? Or is it a matter of, because I want to talk about this. I actually mentioned in the comments earlier about Matip having some really weird passes that really threw us under the bus, threw Van Dijk under the bus a couple of times, and just kind of created something out of nothing for Crystal Palace when they were just chasing the ball and we were able to control the ball. But overall, our center backs, I mean, even Van Dijk, and one thing I want to talk about was there were a couple of situations where he is not himself yet. And we kind of expected that. But does that kind of affect how that high line looks?
Well, yeah, 100%. And I think if we look at this season, up until last week, Matip was the only one that hadn't had a major dip in form at any point during the season. And that's the weird thing is we haven't had a stretch where all 4 have even played average, straight up average across the board. They're at every single stage of the season, one of those 4 have been off form, significantly. Early in the season, Robbo forgot how to play a high line at all for 3 weeks, which was terrifying. And honestly, the strangest thing that I've ever seen. Trent, he's had at the beginning of the season, I said, if Trent plays this well for even half the season, we're going to win the league. And he hasn't. He hit that form and he was sterling for a month. And then, he got COVID, dropped off the face of the earth, looked terrible. I still think Trent is suffering. Maybe Sadio is too, almost some form of long COVID, because they look so off it sometimes, so legged. I know Trent has kind of bounced back a little bit, but I still wonder about that. Matip, I wonder if he's dealing with some sort of illness because he went off at halftime, right? Like the cup match, and he was so bad. It was like his first touch was gone. It's like he wasn't seeing things very well. He was confused on positioning, and that sort of he kind of picked up right where he left off when he got yanked at halftime. And he just looks like it's almost like he doesn't know like where he's at, and it's a little bit scary how poor he was. Verge, this was the big thing in the offseason. I said is like we don't know what Verge or Gomez are going to look like when they get back. We just don't know. And the weirdest thing about him is he's taking he's doing these odd runs upfield. He's pushing the high line way up, which is basically putting Matip on an island and making things very difficult. But the major thing, like for me, is like the runs and the spacing and the positioning and stuff, that will sort itself out over time. That will probably get resolved. But the thing that I worry about is when he's making these mistakes, he does not have the recovery speed, that top end pace to get back and recover. And that's what's really concerning because I don't know if he's going to get back. Now, honestly, this kind of like new version of Verge without the top end pace is still, in my opinion, better than like 75% of the best center backs in the world. But it is the difference between him being good and great, in my opinion. I do think that not having him at 100% has drastically reduced the effectiveness of the entire back line because he was the leader back there. He is the voice of that back line. I think we've been real easy to split because he's getting sucked so far up the pitch. And then you've got Matip isolated there, and he's got to either choose whether he's covering for an advanced Trent or whether he's going to drop back down into the hole, and he's caught in no man's land way too many times.
Yeah, because it feels like if we're caught up on the right side, with that high line, it's because either Trent pushed up or kind of like I was saying, like he did not have the support defensively on that side. Whereas on the left-hand side with Robo, if we have an issue there, it's because Robo is like behind Van Dijk or something like that, where he's too worried about being able to track back and it kind of like messes up the line on the opposite wing and stuff like that. So it's kind of like two different situations there. But knowing this, I mean, we're not going to change that high line. We did not change that high line when we had, Phillips and, Williams playing last year. So how do you kind of like see it changing moving forward, Gally? Because it feels like one of these teams is going to catch us on these days and convert. Really, Palace was mistiming runs left and right and were constantly offsides. A more clever and opportunistic forwards can really take advantage of this back line right now, especially if that midfield is not on the ball and gives them time. Palace was not able to come out. And a few times where they were able to break through that pass, now you've not only broken through the press, now you have time. And once you have time with that high line, it's not too difficult to pick a pass as long as your forward is making a proper run.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're all hoping that Virgil's speed comes back a little bit. He picks up more and more of his quickness as he gets more and more back to health. I think a big part of this is probably over time is Konate taking on the role of the primary partner, because I think Konate does give you pace and power. So I think that he offers that. Why was Gomez the number one choice alongside Van Dijk? Because he was actually quicker than Van Dijk, believe it or not. And that was like the amazing part was you had someone with more pace than Virgil, and Virgil could outrun most wingers that were going past. My biggest thing is that I feel that Virgil knows he's a step slower, and because he feels he's a step slower, mentally he's trying to cheat every time. I feel like he's constantly trying to take a step forward, and we're seeing that through ball be played where he's trying to almost catch people off sides. And that was the opposite, right? The thing you never saw Virgil do was raise his hand when someone ran by him. Because if someone was going by him, there was a good chance in Virgil's mind he might be onside, and I'm gonna drop back. I'm gonna go. Now he's almost like, I know I can't catch up with him, So I need to catch him off sides. Like, and I don't want to use Harry Maguire and him in the same sentence, but it, but it has the same look of those style center backs. It's a John Stones move. If I can't beat you, I will try to trap you or convince the line judge that you were trapped. And he did it twice against Palace. And both times he was left completely standing. There were, I think, Fab and Hendo both times were actually running and tracking back beyond him when he was arguing for the offside. And, that makes me nervous.
And I don't want to put the whole thing on Van Dijk slightly being slower, because I mean he's not slow still as a center back, because obviously the starting point was too high. But I think in going back to, I think one of the comments was, I mean, in the past, going back to the title winning year, and actually the entire club era, when we're trying to close out a game, really, really close out a game in the last 5 to 10 minutes, we used to have good old Lovren come in, right? Or if he was starting, then Matip would come in, and we would have 3 center backs and go back to that formation where there's 3 center backs and we still have Trent and Robo on the wings and stuff. Why not switch to that a lot earlier in these games where we are clearly struggling? Is that, again, stubbornness, Bickler, or we feel like it's too early, we don't want to sit too far back?
That specifically isn't stubbornness. You've never seen Klopp do that. You've never seen him go 3 at the back. I can't remember a time at any.
I think it was more 5 in the back than 3 in the back, if you will. I mean, he would put that extra center back in there against a team I don't know, Burnley or somebody like that, who we knew, we were only up by 1, let's say, if it's 1-0, 2-1. And we know they're going to start loading the ball into the box and things like that. We would put, like I say, in the last 5 minutes or whatever, Lovren would come in, Gomez would come in, whoever was not playing would come in and be an extra center back.
Right. I mean, you could do that, right? And I suppose we've probably done that with some substitutions, but I think you do that and you have to completely change the tactics on both fullbacks, which I don't know how effective we've been at that. And if you do that, you think about that, if you're doing that and you're dropping another defender in there, so there's 3 and then 2 wingers or quasi fullbacks, you're essentially taking a man out of the middle of the pitch, because either that or you're taking a wide attacker off and you're going 2 up front. I think when you do that, you see the midfield a little bit. And I think that's a problem, is that we haven't been as dominant in midfield. So I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. This just goes back to the first part of this conversation we had, is I don't know how good we are adjusting tactically on the fly. I can't remember games where we've had to make major tactical and formation shifts that have won us the game. And I remember 3 or 4 years ago, it seemed like we were very good at us seeing 3 or 4 formations throughout the course of a match based on personnel. And I really don't so maybe Gally's right. Maybe it is just an overall availability issue where we just don't have enough of the right moving parts to make those tactical adjustments on the fly. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did, but I don't know the answer to that. My guess is I think we're not seeing that just because of what the bench looks like, which is not the best.
So Gally, before we end the center back conversation and kind of move along a bit further in the game, because I want to get to the penalty and stuff like that, but in your mind right now, the ideal center back pairing?
The ideal center back pairing for me is still Matip and Van Dijk. I do believe that, Konate really has to press on and have a more consistent 3 or 4 appearances in a row. And I mean, even if that's sporadically when he gets his opportunities, I don't think he's given us 3 great 90-minute performances yet in a row. And I think it's hard to usurp someone who has arguably been our best defender so far this year. But if we have another week like we've just had from Matip, coming out of this break, you're going to have to give Konate a run with Van Dijk, because Gomez is nowhere near at the level. Paul said earlier we had no idea how Virgil would look when he came back. We found out how Gomez would look on Sunday. He looks like a homeless person came out from under a bridge, about 30 pounds overweight.
Yeah, I think if you could have the old Gomez back, and as says like her ideal is Phillips and Van Dyke. I mean, I think I've spoken about like Phillips before. I still don't think he fits the system. Does not have the pace, and it would only be worse. I think Matip in some games, honestly, for the most part of the season, like Bickler says, aside from the last couple of games where he almost looks like he had a concussion and still has not been over it or something like that. I mean, he's been probably our like best center back, especially on home games where he can kind of like come up with the ball and stuff like that. I mean, heck, what was it? Arsenal game? He was like playing like our number 10. He was our best offensive player at the same time. Bickler, before we go on, let me take your best pairing right now on top of your head.
Well, I think Ash is right in the fact that you're never going to see Phillips and VBD next to each other, and that's for a reason, especially because if you're going to have Van Dijk sucking all the way up front into the midfield, I would start Cade Gordon at center back before I would start Nat Phillips, just because, like, if you're going to have somebody isolated on an island with Van Dijk up far, I want someone with at least the wheels to be able to get back, and that's not going to be Nat as much as I love him. It's still Matip for me. Still Matip until proven otherwise for longer than a week. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have Konate knocking on the door if there's too much more of the nonsense we saw the last two games from Matip. Yeah, I don't have very much. God damn. I wish that, like, I don't know. I wish it's so crazy to me to have that amount of talent between Van Dijk, Matip, Konate, and Gomez. And I feel like none of them are really firing at even 80% capacity. They all look like the tank's half full, which is really frustrating. But yeah, Matip, Van Dijk for me still.
I agree, especially for home games. I think, if we're going to face maybe a more physical, like a number 9 or something like that, like we had in the AC Milan game with like Abramovich and stuff like that, I can see Konate being more effective. But I agree with Bickler. I just don't feel as comfortable, I guess, and as confident when he's back there yet. But that's not, due to anything he's done specifically. I think it's just more like we have not seen enough of him to have, confidence like, oh, he's got it. Even, we're talking about his pace and everything like that. Even, still with one-on-one, I feel like Van Dijk's got this. Part of me worries more this year, but still there's that confidence like he's got this. If nothing else, he's going to be able to slow him down enough to get the back of, the rest of the defense back and stuff like that. So we continue with the game. It's kind of like a Ellison Becker show giving like a goalie clinic. He made, I always like make fun of these YouTube videos of highlights. He literally made like one YouTube video worth of highlights out of one game, probably. If you're too lazy to dig out other saves from him, you can just pull them up from this game and have a pretty good scouting YouTube video for this guy. And then we get the penalty. I heard a lot of talk about the penalty and about like the refereeing and stuff. And obviously, whenever it's Liverpool, everybody complains. So the referee decision is actually, let's go back to the Ox goal first. Is Bobby offsides, or should he have been called offsides in that goal, Galley?
I mean, I think by the letter of the law, like by the way the law is worded, you could argue it either way, and the reason they didn't chalk it off is that both the linesman and the ref said they saw it and felt it was okay, and I think that's why it wasn't a clear and obvious error, and they didn't chalk it off from VAR. I think if the linesman pulls his flag up there, can anyone say anything? Bobby clearly moves his head at it. He tries to head the ball, which could then argue leads the defender to defend his header, which then stops him from clearing the ball. But like I learned as a kid, right? Clear the ball. Like, what's the first thing? The ball's coming, clear it. So if the defender really wants to just go clear the ball, he can. I think the goalie was trying to kind of argue that by Bobby going to make that, he wasn't in the same position he would have been to defend Ox. That doesn't make any sense to me. But I think by the letter of the law, Bobby made an attempt to play the ball. He was clearly offsides, and they had every right to chalk the goal off. And I would have thrown stuff across the living room had it happen.
How about you, Bickler? Because when I was watching it live, when the goal happened and they were showing, like, you know, in slow motion what happened, I was like, Vieira is going to overturn this, was my initial reaction, because I thought they would call that offside. He's clearly in the play.
Yeah, I thought it was off. And I'll go even – I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it.
Do it.
I watched the City match and I watched the Liverpool match. And there was some shady calls that City, I thought, deserved and did not get, which is very unlike any City game. If you watch them, they generally get the benefit of the doubt when VAR is involved.
Oh, wait. Bickler is going there.
I'm going there. I thought we had some incredibly favorable calls, which generally doesn't happen. I see Gally just muted himself. That's probably smart. If I was one of those people, I would put my tinfoil hat on, go out into the woods and say the Premier League is trying to make this thing a little bit closer and more exciting.
I'm all for it.
I don't want to say it, but if you watch the City highlights and the Liverpool highlights back to back, you can make the case.
So I can't talk about the City game because, like I said, I was traveling all weekend. We were in New Orleans with the family, and I was, lucky enough to squeeze in the Liverpool game early in the morning. I did not watch the City game. I was following the score and obviously, we'll talk about that, kind of puts us back in the race, which I thought people kind of like jumped the gun too early on anyway. But are you sharing that tinfoil hat with Bickler there, Gally? Is that big enough for two?
No, that hat is not big enough for two. And we're not flipping it over and making it a boat to ride down the river in together either. I'm going to pass for now, but I will say this. I question all of these things when it comes to I hate the fix. We just got off a weekend of 4 amazing NFL football games, right? And if anyone wanted to believe that sport could be fixed, right, it would be 4 games ending like those 4 happened to end, all right around point spreads and right on the road. Makes a lot of sense. But what I think people miss in all this is there is an easy angle for the drama, and I think that's where VAR will always struggle. Is VAR allows for people to say that the game's fixed because we don't get consistent usage of it, which we don't. This isn't a conversation about the usage of VAR as much as it is why there will always be people like Paul telling us that there could be a little bit of shenanigans happening here. And he might not be that far off. And I know there are a lot of people out there that believe it. And I think that it comes from the fact that it's not uniform. And because there's so much ambiguity in it, that penalty that we saw was no way more of a penalty than Alan St. Maximum getting wiped out in the penalty box the week before and they didn't even take a look at it. There's just no rhyme or reason for what is or isn't a penalty. And I think because we get a subject nature that then brings in officials to correct their own subjectivity is just going to keep leading to these types of questions. Because to me, that's a tough situation to apply VAR.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm wearing the tinfoil hat. I don't know if it's just a coincidence. I did think, we had some decisions go our way, but it's obvious as a fan, you're like, well, it's about time. But I still feel like it's a coincidence because if that was an issue, which, I've suspected, especially like in the Turkish league and stuff like that in the past, on various leagues, actually. But you would think they would keep it closer and not get it that far off to begin with, especially where we've had some games with City where they've kind of gotten some calls that they probably shouldn't have had. So if they didn't have those, we wouldn't maybe, or, to play devil's advocate, maybe they're like, oh shit, we really screwed that one up. Didn't take our chances. Let's make up for it now. So I guess we'll find out if this gets closer and we win the title at the end. But so let's get to the second decision, the penalty, which I personally think is a penalty. And I did not even understand why there was so much discussion on it. Is it soft? Yes. Is the goalie an idiot? Yes, the goalie is asking for it. And I will say that if that was Mane, he is kind of like fumbling around and falling in such a way where he doesn't get that call. I think Jota acts a bit more smart, or I hate to say it, but Neymar like, where, trying to get a call and he manages to, just the way he kind of like, knows what the goalie is going to do. And he kind of like puts that body in motion, like I was going there. See, now I couldn't kind of thing, and sells it. But I think by the letter of the law and what happened, I thought it was a clear penalty to me, and I didn't even understand why there was so much discussion to it. Bickler, take the foil hat off. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, so you and I are going to be firmly in the minority on this, and I think it was a pen as well. A lot of people have an issue with the fact that when you slow it down, Jota looks like he leans into the path of the keeper, which was the other direction from where the ball was. So I can understand that. The other issue is that a lot of people think that like it wasn't an obvious goal scoring opportunity because the ball was gone already. The actual letter of the law and the rule is that it doesn't matter where the ball is. Okay, you come out as a keeper and you make contact and you don't get ball, it's a pen, and that's what happened. So like all that being said, if it's 2-1 and that penalty goes against us in the other box and it's tied 2-2, I'm probably burning things to the ground today. So I understand. I definitely understand why people are upset about it. Maybe not so much our fans. Our fans were. It was weird how our fans were like temporary Palace fans. Like I was like, you guys, we're trying to win this thing, right? Like
people were outraged that we
got that call. Yeah, it was like it's like, oh, Facebook's all Steven Gerrard and Aston Villa and mad about this penalty.
What do you think, Gally? A penalty or no?
So it's definitely a penalty. It's a penalty because the laws are pretty clear, and the guy cleared out the player. Now, I'll say this. That's a classic example of a player winning a penalty. And I do not mean by any means it was a dive. I don't think he's a cheat. I don't want hate mail. And if you want to send some hate mail, send it to Gally. I'm good with it.
I'm going to put the email address right here as you're saying.
Yeah, we'll go down in the messages as we speak. But in all seriousness, I have no problem with saying he won the penalty because that's what he did. He did lean in. He knew what was happening. The ball got away from him. The keeper was coming. He knew there was going to be contact, and he made sure by leaning in slightly, and it wasn't like an egregious dive. There was no simulation. But he leaned in. He made sure that the keeper came across the top of his thigh, which would take him straight to the ground, so that there would be enough contact to warrant a penalty. And I think in classic fashion, the EPL refs get it wrong because they're afraid to call what they see. It was right in front of his face. There was no reason to miss it. He didn't want to call the contact, so he waited for the screen to wait 5 minutes to send him to the screen, and then he called it the penalty that it was. But I'll say this, for all the people out there on Facebook that were whining and crying and bitching and complaining, I never once whined or cried when Luis Suarez would dive, take a 7-foot step and dive down on the floor. I didn't like it, right? When we would kind of laugh at it. But if you're awarded a penalty, you should root for your team to score. And you should never go to social media to basically talk against a decision that's given against your side. Root for the team. Please, people, get over yourselves.
Like I say, I can understand discussing it. I just didn't understand the outrage over it. Like, it's one thing to like kind of like talk about it like how we're talking now, what we thought of the call and stuff. But there was almost like people were mad. They were like it was almost like, we don't want to win like this if this is what it means. I mean, and I thought, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think if a player who's a bit more naive, or I don't know what the correct word is, and that was my initial thought when I saw it. I was like, it's a penalty, and kind of like you're saying, it's an earned penalty. Jota plays it smart to get that penalty. Correct. And my initial reaction was, and Mane was named, because we've seen situations like this with Mane where the way he falls, like Mane would go towards the other side and kind of like bump into him, and even though he's been stopped from getting to the ball, we would not get that call because you would be like, oh no, that had nothing to do with it. But I thought it was pretty clear. Yeah, I just didn't understand the amount of discussion, leave alone the outrage over the discussion. But we win the game. And not to mention that was, and I know, we were hanging out for dear life, and I don't know if we were going to end up winning that game if we didn't get the third, to be perfectly honest. But end of the story is we get that win. A tough away game. Crystal Palace is always kind of like tough to. I know we had some like ridiculous scores against them, but it's a place where it's kind of like tough to play. Get the 3 points. So with a game in hand, once we get that win, we're cut the deficit to 6 points. And you beat City, it's down to 3 points, goal difference, and all that kind of good stuff. And this is why I think people kind of counted, the league done too early. I mean, it's probably too early to get the hopes up and be like, oh, we're right in this. But, I mean, obviously the opportunity is there, and that's all this team needs, I think, to keep kind of going. They're both going to have like a bunch of tough games. So the league is on and the race is on. And you know what other race is on? Well, actually, it's pretty much over between Kelly and Gally is in the fantasy league. This has been scrolling down, Batman, to find our friend Gally over here. I don't know if you looked at the ratings, but our good friend, the Polish Prince Mateusz, is actually in the 10th spot over our friend Gally, who is now almost 100 points behind Kelly. I know you keep giving us to talk about playing it a week at a time,
no.
stuff, but I almost feel like it's time to bring Hodgson in or something and get you canned out of this team.
It's almost time, yeah. It might be. It might be time to pull a full Watford, fire the manager, maybe.
If it was Watford, I would be fired 5 times. Meanwhile, scrolling even down further over here, unnecessary pet drama is 29th with 21 points, and I have gained room, people. Who would have thought? With 41 points, now I am only 18 points behind our friend Bickler over here. So Bickler, you should be worried. Not really, because I'm sure I'll find a way to screw that one up. But Kelly is up now by 25 points, looks like, over Dan Bennett, who has a streak of like poor weeks over here, back to back to back. So Kelly has to be happy about that. But Bickler, any comments on your fantasy performance and how poor it was?
I mean, I've still got a fixture to go, so I'm not worried about it. Plus, I'm a little bit like the EPL, where I'm just trying to make this thing exciting. Pull it close, let you catch up a little bit. You know what I mean? Gotcha. Yeah. It's not fun when you it's not last week. You're so dejected and sad. It's not fun.
I know. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Keep me in the race. Just Premier League does with Liverpool. I appreciate it. Makes me, reason to get up in the morning. Michael Martin says maybe mad is too strong a word, but the inconsistency of VAR is definitely madding. We can definitely all agree to that. And I think that's the biggest issue with any of these is the inconsistency, more than the calls being made, especially those of us who probably watch too much soccer, if anything, can instantly find the exact same situation we saw 2 weeks ago, last week, 3 days ago, where it was called the complete opposite way. The whole concept of VAR to me, which I'm still torn on if I like it or not. We all know Stitch, my dog, hates it with a passion, but is to eliminate that inconsistency. So even if the ref is not consistent, there's somebody else to come in and say, hey, man, this is the rule. You either didn't see it or your interpretation doesn't go by the rules. This is what we're going with in terms of setting that standard. And sadly, we have not seen that. So that's probably like another good topic that we can hit while the boys are away on international break, because God knows Bickler is not going to watch international football. And I don't even know if Turkey is playing for me to watch. Gally will watch just to get mad, and we'll take advantage of that next week. A quick subject I did want to hit today, though. I did not want to talk to one about transfers and stuff this week. I'm sure we'll talk about what didn't happen next Monday's episode or on Thursday's episode, where we will take like the Thursday crew might be able to take a look at that. But one big topic was obviously the word was that the Keller is going to start the League Cup final that we made. And then obviously with Ellison putting out this performance, everybody's like, why are we starting that? And there are people like Bickler who wants Ali to start and should not be a discussion. Am I getting that right, Bickler?
Yeah, I took a beating on that this week, didn't I? I guess I'm in the severe minority here. Here's the thing. Do I think that he should start in the final? Kelleher, I'm talking about. Yes, because you started him in the semi and the quarters, right? So for me, here's the thing, though. If you're in a cup competition, you hit the quarters and the semis, to me, that's when you start fielding your first team. And we don't do that with the rest of the team. You don't see us putting up Cade Gordon. We're not going to play Gordon in front of Mo Salah in the final. No, we're not going to do that. So, like, why are we applying this, like, weird rule to a goalkeeper because he's a goalkeeper? It makes no sense to me. We're going to be in a cup final. I don't care if it's the Mickey Mouse Cup. I don't care if it's a small competition to some people. It is a League Cup final, and we are going to have arguably the best goalkeeper on the bench. And it makes no sense to me. Like, is this man management where you're building up a kid for the future? That's great. Maybe, unless he has a howler in the first 5 minutes and loses a cup final on a total error, and then he's emotionally destroyed, and he's Carius 2.0, and he's out in California eating ice cream, taking pictures of it on Instagram, and we hate him forever. So, like, there's two sides of every coin. Like, this could be a good thing for him. It could be an awful thing for him. I think you start him because of the precedent you set. I just don't agree with that precedent. And I think we're treating one position entirely different than we do other positions. It makes not a lot of sense to me. And like at the end of the day, when you boil it down to one sentence, you have one of the world's best at a position on your bench for a cup final, and I don't get it.
And just to be clear, like, it had nothing to do with, Becker just saving us the game or anything like that. You were originally thinking that to start.
It has nothing to do with Becker's performances versus Crystal Palace. Not at all.
See, I was about to kind of like pound on you, but I agree. That is a good point that you made, that we would not start Gordon. So let's start with let's go to Gally first, and then I'll kind of like throw in my 2 cents. But Gally, what do you make of what Bickler just said, and not the ice cream part, the goalie part?
Well, first off, I don't wish on young Kelleher a day on the Santa Monica Pier eating ice cream in California for Instagram, because that poor Irish boy would get sunburned and look like a lobster by about 9:30 in the morning. Carius might be able to survive, but a good Irishman like him is not making it.
Right.
I understand both sides of this. I've always believed you start your best lineup. Like, you start your best players when there's trophies on the line. That's kind of what I learned. When I first started following this sport and someone had to explain to me why they played tournaments in the middle of the season that weren't any part of the regular season or part of any type of playoff, I was all confused. But then people told me these were opportunities to play squad players and bleed in other players throughout the tournament until it got to the money time. And then your best players play to win the prize. So for me, it was always like a prize fight, right? You send out your fighters, you send everybody out, but when like the money is on the line, you send out the people who get the knockouts, because that's how you win with your best players. So I would expect that. I will say this: Pep has done this at City, where he picks a tournament, he gives it to the understudy, and he allows his backup keeper to run all the way through, even into the finals. And his argument is, you don't know that person will ever be ready to play a big game until you let him have one. And playing in the 4th round of the Mickey Mouse Cup against Shrewsbury compared to playing in the final against Chelsea is a different kettle of fish, right? So maybe that's what Klopp's doing here. I've said this about Kelleher forever. People make it out there like he's going to challenge Alisson someday. He's never, ever, ever going to be Liverpool's number 1. But possibly playing in a tournament like this might just allow him to become some other big club's number 1. And I think that's what Kelleher is to this club right now, is he's a really good number 2 until they are given a bid that makes enough sense to make money. Because this kid's going to want to play first-team football. And Alisson has 5 to 8 more years at Liverpool in the first 11, in my opinion.
Man, you guys make good cases. I almost like want to come back a week later and make my ruling on this. But I understand what Bickler is saying. Like they let it says, we should go all out, and we should. It is a trophy, and I know like the League Cup is like when you're in it and about to win it, it's a trophy. When you kind of like roll the kids out there and lose it, it becomes Mickey Mouse and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's on the wall as a number, so it must mean something, right? So let's go win it. I think the reason initially, before Bickler made such a great case for it, I kind of like strongly agree with the Keller concept was we are partially here because of him, not despite him, with his performances overall, like the penalty saves and all that kind of stuff. So he's had a good tournament throughout. So to reward him with that final only seems fair. Another thing I brought on the Discord channel, in our fan Discord channel, which, you should join if you're into like any kind of footy talk, or if you want to hear about Bickler's potato love. But, my point was, I would think, we talked about in the last podcast towards the end of it, how much we like this team and how close and tight this team is. And what makes this team great is because of that locker room. I firmly believe, and I know Bickler doesn't agree with this, but this is something that is decided throughout the squad as well. And I'm not saying they're going around and like, everybody's putting like a little piece of paper, curling it and putting it in the basket, and they're taking votes in the locker room. But the leadership of this team, like, they already knew that this was going to happen, including Ellison inside. Like Ellison just did not find this out. This was going to be his tournament all along, regardless of what happens. And I don't think his expectation was for that. And as tight-knit as this team is and this locker room is, I think it's part of that culture where you want the other one to succeed as well. And I feel like that's a good reason by itself to have him get the opportunity he deserves and he's earned. And that's, I guess, the biggest word to me in that is the fact that he has earned that with his play and he has brought the team there. So even though I understand we should put our best lineup out there, I think the kid has earned the chance. But like I say, Bickler makes a good point. I mean, Golden has probably earned the chance too, but
Tyler Morton,
you're not going to do that.
Yeah, right. Do you think? I'll ask you this one though. Do you think Mendy will be in goal for Chelsea, or do you think they'll have Kepa in goal? I think it'll be Mendy because they're going to play for a trophy.
But I don't care about that.
No, but
I understand what you're saying. I know what you mean, but
they're putting out their best 11, and you're going out to play. You'd think you would, at the minimum, start that way. And I understand it. I think it's a great idea. Again, I think that it could be a big confidence booster. This is one of those moments where if we win on penalties and the guy's jumping around like, Jerzik, and he's going crazy in Istanbul, we'll all be like, oh, that Klopp, he's so brilliant, right? But if he takes a tough one off the noggin and he rolls one out and some guy freaking side foots it into the back of the net and it's 1-0 and he gives up a howler to Lukaku, people will question and be like, was the 20-something-year-old ready to make that play? It won't matter. That's how this happens. This is when you put yourself in this position when you kind of go against the norm. And the norm is you get to a cup final, you play your first team regulars. But he doubled down and he did it a month in advance, which lets you know he has the players backing and he loves the player. But don't kid yourself. You're going to put more pressure on him by naming him the starter now than he would have if we found out 1 hour and 15 minutes before. And maybe that's part of this. There's always these underlying teaching moments. Maybe this is about his preparation and about his mental state right now because he's not going to get a lot of game time. But don't kid yourself. Naming him the starter now made this a story on this podcast. It didn't need to be.
I also don't think that
perform. I mean, it was going to be anyway, I think, to be honest with you. But I mean, because, okay, like Michael Martin says, I don't think Keller gets the nod if he didn't have the backing of the manager and the players. If they had the belief in him, roll him out there. And that's why, I mean, I agree with that. And like I said earlier, and not to mention, I think everybody knew this all along in the club. I think, Gally, you might be right in terms of getting more pressure through the fan base. But I think everybody in that, like locker room knew what was going to happen. This was not news to them. This was probably more
Right.
news to us.
So if that's not news to them and everybody knew, why are we bringing the players into this? Like, oh, it doesn't happen without the players agreeing to it. Well, like if like Klopp comes out very early on and says it's his tournament, what doesn't that like mean that the players don't have a say in it? Like that's how I read that. In like I've played in enough teams and enough sports to know, like, dude, like players aren't going to go to Klopp and be like, dude, don't start him in the final. Don't do it. Like he's not ready. Like like Allison's the best goalkeeper in the world. Put him in. Like that shit's not happening.
No, that's not going to happen. No, but at the same time, you're not going to suddenly, this is something everybody knew, and like including Ellison himself knew that this was
so the players don't have a say in
how far we go. And going back to like the whole like Curious 2.0 thing, I mean, if we kind of play and manage and put out lineups with the fear of that, we would never play kids. Because Gordon, like let's say Gordon misses that goal to wide open net, eventually we lose that game. I mean, that could come back to haunt him too.
Well, me, I disagreed with the lineup in the semis because of that. I thought it was too kid heavy. So like I know what you're saying, but at least like my argument's consistent for all the players, not just for Kelleher. Like I felt like the semis was like, I thought that was an unnecessary risk. I thought it wasn't smart. Say we don't win the league. Say we don't win the Champions League. Say we get knocked out of the FA Cup. Wouldn't it be nice to say that we won a cup competition? I think it would, versus like making sure that the kids got minutes in a semi of a cup. Like, and this goes all the way to the finals. It just doesn't make sense to me. And this whole notion of, well, the players supported it. Like, the players didn't have a fucking say in it. Let's be real. Right. They didn't have a say in it.
I disagree with that.
No, they didn't. Because Klopp came out, they're like, Klopp came out very early on and said, this is Kelleher's tournament.
But you think that just happens without having, I guess, I don't know if like the okay or backing is not the right word, but
yes,
knowing that is accepted and respected throughout the team.
Yes. Yep.
Like I say, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's like a dynamic that you would want. I'm not saying you don't let them run the show, but having them know the show.
I think that most of those players are smart enough to understand there's a lack of rotation in the Premier League fixtures. The rotation comes in the cup games, and it comes for the young players. And I think they understand that. The disconnect for me is like, for me, when you get to that stage of the tournament, you go win it. You put your best team out there.
We're gonna have to have the Thursday crew go over this as well, because I really would like to get more takes on this. And like I say, I definitely understand Bickler's point in terms of like why not have it throughout the field, and I think that does make sense. But when you said that, I was like, yeah, I get that. I just feel like, obviously the goalie position is a totally different position. So before we go, because we went over our regular time already with Bickler's potato recipes early on, but January next Monday is going to be the last day. By the time we record, we'll know what the hell happened. Are we even talking about a signing, or are we talking about, we're reading all the FSG out people's comments? Gally, what's your gut feeling? Do we have anybody new in that squad?
No, we have 5 new rumors of players that we're monitoring to be linked with in the summer. There's no one coming in January, and if they do, it would be great. But honestly, if this club was going to do business in January, they would have done it on the 1st.
Bickler, what do you think?
I mean, I think they already said they weren't doing business in January, and then we're all going to act surprised, and we're all going to say FSG out and how tight they are and complain about how we've never replaced Genie. It'll be yes. I'm going to call out sick.
Yeah, I feel like there will be a couple of players leaving, either on loan or sold. But I think the market is still not where we want it to be, and I don't think we make a move. I mean, and with all the complaining and worrying that was done for this January for not getting somebody to replace Mon Mane, especially now that we kind of like leaped over those games, everybody's going to be back when we come back to the league and everything. I feel like, we're past. And knowing Klopp, I mean, anybody we sign, heck, does not play for freaking months anyway. So even if you bring somebody in January, when are they going to be useful? Like going back to what you were saying, yeah.
November.
Probably, exactly, yeah. So they're not
November.
Be, exactly.
He trusts them right after the World Cup.
Boys, this bench, boys. So yeah, put Gordon out there every day, Ox on the wing, and we got this. I mean, like you say, I think it was a pretty successful run to get that. I mean, this was a worry for months, and to be able to kind of like leap through it, and we kind of like lost the points when we didn't think we would lose the points, and gained the points when we thought we would lose them. But at least we're in the race for one reason or the other. We don't know yet. Well, that remains to be seen. Gentlemen, thanks a lot. Thanks to all those watching, listening. Do the liking, sharing, and all that kind of good stuff. We'll be back next Monday, but Thursday's crew will be here, same time, 7 p.m. Central live. And I really would love to see what those guys are going to say about this whole goalie thing and the tinfoil. And meanwhile, let's not forget, if you have any savory recipes for use of sweet potatoes, send them in for our friend. No, you don't want any savory? Galley's shaking his head. You don't want? You're against sweet potatoes too?
I'm an anti-sweet potato guy myself.
I'm not a huge fan, but it has this format. Can people please send in some good sweet potato recipes so we can convert these two guys over here to at least try it? I'm not saying I'm a big fan, but it has its place. So for the sake of sweet potatoes and kettle corn, that's
place is in the garbage can. That's where its place is.
I was gonna say its place is like that one. It's that one thing at Thanksgiving dinner I don't have to try to fit onto my plate. I just skip right over it. It's like
I feel like I'm always fighting the losing battle, like fighting for respect for Afghan, fighting for sweet potatoes, fighting for kettle corn. My job is never done.
You just compared sweet potatoes, kettle corn, and Afghan, and I actually feel bad for Afghan.
Actually, sweet potatoes are called yams. That's the difference between sweet potatoes and yams. Yams are actually originate in Africa. Sweet potatoes are the Americanized version of that thing. Anyway, sorry.
Really? Actually, yeah. I feel like yams are totally different as well. We should do a whole podcast next Monday. There's nothing going on anyway in terms of a game where we talk about
yams are slightly larger and stringier, but they originate from Africa. But they were like when they came over and seeded everything in America. That's sweet potatoes.
Tell you guys what, next week's trivia is going to be potato related. So study up, Galley. And thanks to again all send in those recipes. Save me, please. See you guys next week.